This is Dr. David Allen, and we're talking about the commandment, thou shalt not lie. And Mr. Atkinson is making the point that our society is kind of made up in such a way that lying is kind of the norm. And somehow, if we're going to really improve ourselves, we have to come personally to that understanding to admit that we're failures, that we do lie and fall short. But Mr. Atkinson, you run a lot of important boards and companies. I mean, people can't lie in those meetings, else the company will get screwed up. How do you ensure, as a top accountant, in these companies you're involved with, which deal with millions of dollars, how do you ensure that you're getting the truth?
You know, in the ancient world, when this commandment was addressed, it was in the Old Covenant. You'll talk about telling the truth in the gate. It's a very you see it all throughout the Old Covenant, as we call it, in the gate. Why was that? Because the judges, the princes, sat in the gate of the city, and that was the law court of the day. Now, there were no crafty lawyers with all kinds of fancy explanations there. Those judges who were sitting there had to discern the individuals they were listening to. Did they have a history of speaking the truth? Were they people you can rely on? And when you come to board meetings, whatever those board meetings are, and I had one on Friday, a directors meeting, and 3 weeks earlier, the annual general meeting of a big company, which I was present at, and you can very quickly discern who are telling the truth.
How?
People will lie with an open, smiling face. Most of the confidence tricksters of this world some of them would convince the Archangel Gabriel that they were wonderful people. I have learned to discern by body language, by facial expressions.
So you sit there at the board meeting and you can actually work out who's telling the truth.
Oh, yes. I've got a good idea. Body language, facial expressions.
Do you confront that or not?
Shrugs. Oh, you confront that in many ways. Even silence. Silence. You've got a controversial point.
Give me an example. How?
Because there's a controversial point which an individual, should we say, has an interest in. Now, he's not going to say anything for or against it. He's going to remain silent because he is hoping that they will vote for it. And he could say, I never said a word. See, there are many, the innuendo in our society. You must have heard of gossip. Gossip, innuendos.
But in a powerful board meeting, you can't have gossip.
Oh, you don't have gossip, but you have statements made. I've just had to survive it lasted for 3 hours. And there was one particular individual who was extremely difficult. And you have to overcome these things that are, for instance, in our society today, looking at the Bahama controversy, you have two diametrically opposed views. One's for and one's against. Now, we Bahamians have to discern who's telling the truth, and I will have to lead it to my leaders or my listeners to decide who is telling the truth. And that's not an easy thing to do. That's a very complex process. And then you have politicians have promised this, and they've promised that, and they have promised the other, and you have not come to pass. A doctor, you see, it's not as easy as you think. Let's go back. You see, I've said in our society is turned upside down, and unfortunately, Jane, out there, it's beneficial sometimes to lie. It has become beneficial, and people know that. Now, for instance, I remember once individuals were selling shares in a particular company. Now, I knew the details from behind the scene that particular company had problems. But you'd have thought by the people out here selling the shares, it was marvelous. I knew that there was another company coming into operation in that same field, which would make the shares of this particular company virtually worthless. And I approached the person selling them, and I said, "You know that, and you're telling, no, don't." He came out with all this salesmanship. I said, "You're telling a lie." "No, I'm not. I'm only dealing with the facts." I said, "You just know, I don't know anything at all about that. That is," but I knew it was in my field. I couldn't say anything because but I couldn't make any general statement. But I knew those people bought all those shares, and when this other company came up, they were virtually worthless because. And that's what happened.
It's sad, isn't it?
It was advantageous to that salesman.
And you tried to confront the person.
I just mentioned to the person he didn't want to hear the truth. And a lot of people do not want to hear the truth because it's not to their advantage in our society.
Well, Ron, let's twist it a little bit. Is there a time in life when lying could be right?
Possibly. For instance, you take a doctor talking with a terminally ill patient. Is he going to tell him or her outright that, nothing's going to improve and you might as well sit here and die? Or is he going to try and give him some glimmer of hope? There is that situation. And then I've come across many a situation in which husbands, wives have made wrong decisions, and very often wives, let's take it on, their wife knows the husband is cheating on her. She knows that. Confronting her with the truth, she's going to refuse the truth. She doesn't want to believe it. So there's going to be a self-delusion. And if you try to present her with the truth, it's not going to help the situation. Self-deception is very, very difficult in our society.
Now, the Bible says, tell the truth in love.
In love, yes.
So does it mean that if you tell the truth in anger, that's like lying?
That's not going to work. I would agree.
Is that like lying?
Well, you see, the question...
What does it mean to tell the truth in love?
Yes, and you've always stressed that, and I think in your field you do that.
What does it mean to you to tell the truth in love?
Gentle, kind, and you put it out, and very often when you tell the truth in love, you're going to hurt someone. It's how you do it. As I said, self-deception is extremely strong.
Are you good at that?
No, I'm not very good at that.
You just nail the truth.
Well, that is my nature, but I've learned from you to approach it in a different sort of way. Yes. And I've learned that lesson from you, and I'm very thankful to you for teaching that lesson to me, because yes, you can learn the truth, and the truth shall set you free, but I have found human nature doesn't like the truth, and people don't want to hear the truth. For instance, a trade union leader telling the people down below that you're lazy, you're not putting in proper hours, you're leaving on Friday with some flimsy excuse so you can go to Miami, you've got to come in at 9 and go to 5. Do you think the ordinary average worker wants to hear that? No, doesn't want to hear that. He wants to know how much more money you're going to get for me. He does not particularly interested in the truth about him or herself. They're not interested. You don't want to hear it, And then sometimes...
So, Ron, you're saying some people just can't take the truth.
It's very difficult. I tell you that...
You met people who just can't take the truth.
Well, I told you that human nature is... It's deceitful, it's dishonest. I can only talk about myself. I see that within myself. And I also see, though, that when Christ calls a person, he bids him come and die. That's what Bonhoeffer said in his book, Nachfolger. Now, what does he mean by that? He means you must come and die to yourself. Die to yourself. You've got to fight your own natural human nature, which is born in sin and shapen in iniquity. You may have to physically die, as Bonhoeffer did in 1945. He went back to die. But for most of us, when Jesus said, deny yourself, that's deny your own nature, no lying, come on, no lying, tell the truth to your neighbor, whoever that neighbor may be, and wherever she may be, take up your cross. Now, what's your cross? I can tell you my cross, it's me. I've got to, every day, 60 minutes every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I've got to live up to what Christ is told me to do. No lying, no cheating, no stealing, no fornication, no incense, no adultery. You've got to deny yourself. No gambling. In our society, if we were a Christian society, why no gambling? I'll tell you, I've never gambled in my life, nor have I bought a lottery ticket. Why? Because I can gain only at everybody else losing. That is not Christian as far as I'm concerned. I can only gain when everybody else loses, or most other people lose. So I'm going to buy a raffle ticket for a car. No, there's no problem in that. But all of the other people who bought the raffle ticket, they're losing. I'm gaining. I can't do that. You see? So I have to deny.
Would it help the person wins the raffle and gives the car away for a good cause?
Have you heard? How many of those have you heard? Come on, human nature. I stood in the queue in Miami with my brother-in-law, and he was buying the Miami lottery tickets. I just went with him for the walk, and the lady said to me, "How many do you want?" I said, "I don't want any." She said, "You don't?" She said, "You could win $1 million." I said, "I don't want $1 million." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I didn't earn it." She said, "What's that got to do with it?" I said, "Because I didn't earn it, and I can only win when everybody else loses." She looked at me, and I said, "That's why I don't buy lottery tickets. Good day." And I was talking a foreign language to her. All right? In our society, the end justifies the means. Machiavelli. I stood in the palace in Florence where Machiavelli worked, and he wrote The Prince. And that's where we get the end justifies the means. It doesn't make any difference how you get this $1 million. The end is the most important thing. And so we lie, we cheat, but Jesus is saying, therefore, putting away lies, Ephesians chapter 4, writing to the church in Ephesus. Therefore, putting away lying, let each of us speak is the truth with his neighbor, because we are members one of another. Now, you asked me about Ananias and Sapphira, okay? The redeemed Christian community, redeemed, redemptive, saved, can only exist where we all speak each other in sincerity and truth. Now, the word sincerity, there must be sincerity and truth in the redeemed Christian community.
But you agree that was a little harsh, though?
It was necessary. Necessary. Ephesians, Ephesus.
He came in first, and his wife came in, and they said the same thing, and they...
Because if they'd have told the truth, I've sold this piece of land, I'm keeping 50% for ourselves and giving 50% to the church. Fine. But to say, I've sold this piece of land and giving you the proceeds, that's a lie. And his wife said the same thing. You see, they didn't speak. There was no sincerity and no truth. Now, you see, the word sincerity is two Latin words, sine cera, without wax. Jeremiah, we referred to, you sent him down to the potter. Now, the potter was getting the clay and making dishes with the pot. One of them would be jars. Very, very important. Jars in the old world, that's where they stored water. Okay? Big jars, small jars. It's not like our modern day society. They were the potter had to do good work. Now, when he detected a crack in his work, a dishonest potter put a little tiny piece of wax, in that crack, and then glazed it over, and you would never know until the water got in, and then she began to leak. That's where we get the word sincerity from. Sine cera, without wax. See? It's, again, that's where the word comes from.
So without wax, wax meaning what?
Wax means there's a crack, there's something wrong, and you've skillfully covered up what is wrong. That's where we get sincerity from.
Without wax.
Okay, and truth.
I don't have to cover up anything.
Huh?
I don't have to cover up anything.
No,
But Ron, you know, if they acted in the church today like they did with Ananias and Sapphira, we'd be in a lot of trouble.
Well, you remember...
Don't you agree? That would be
yes,
pretty hard.
it would be.
People would be scared to go to church.
But remember, that was the redeemed community just beginning. And there was the lie had come right in. Now, you're not telling me that people did not know that Ananias and Sapphira were lying. Come on. The people knew how much they sold the land for and how much they kept back. That, you know, people talk and they know. They knew that Ananias and Sapphira were telling lies. The leaders of the church found that out. Now, if they'd have passed that over, that would have been the end of that community. Gone. Lying, no sincerity. And so sometimes it can be very difficult. Now, you keep on...
That doesn't happen in the church today, though.
Well, let us define the church. And I'm going to go back to this. The church is people. It's always people. It's not this big fancy community which requires a whole bunch of money to keep a church and a pastor in a luxurious state and drive in a fancy car and so on. The church is the people. Christ came to save people. He didn't come to put up these big fancy buildings. I don't see anywhere in the New Testament. In the old covenant, we had a temple which had to be maintained. I explained that to you know, about when we come to this tithing business, which related to the Old Testament, but not to here. But people take what suits them, and tithing suits them. They do very well out of it. The Church of Jesus Christ is only concerned with people. It's not concerned with these fabulous institutions. Mm-hmm. And Christ is concerned with the people telling the truth to each other.
So in other words, Sam, because what happened to Ananias and Sapphira is not happening in the church today, it indicates that truth is not that highly valued.
If it did happen, it should be taken out, like cancer. It's a cancer. You're a medical doctor. You know quite well if you don't take care of that cancer, then it will spread. You know, it happened. My late wife, Marina, had cancer, and it metastasized, and it killed her. And that's what will happen. And Christ...
But to do that to the church would be quite painful, wouldn't it?
I don't. The ecclesia I prefer, which is the people. But you see what happened. How many times have I read or people told me in the last 20 years about pastors and evangelists and this and that and the other having adulterous relationship, and the people in the congregation know. The people. I remember once there was this.
But they didn't get struck dead like Ananias and Sapphira.
Well, that was the judgment imposed upon them because it had to come about. Nowadays,
God is more lenient.
I'm not sure. I don't think that God is more lenient. I think we human beings have become more lenient.
Right. We're going to take a break and be right back.